you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending our tech talk. And this is the very first tech talk since we all went into confinement, I believe. So I'd like to thank Lisa Maturo and Deborah Rees for working really hard to make this happen. So we are thrilled today to have Dr. Parth Patel from IQVIA, and he'll explain what IQVIA is, to talk to us about deploying AI and ML solutions for clinical trials recruitment. But before I introduce our speaker, let me go over some housekeeping issues. So we will continue extending CME credits for our tech talks and our ID series presentations. We will distribute the information via email to those that registered for today's event. But if you did not register prior to today's tech talk, you can still obtain CME code information from Lisa Maturo at Christiana Care, and her email address is in the email invitation. Our next ID series, so that will be again our first ID series since the epidemic, will be on May 29th, and Dr. Jeffrey Rouley from University of Pennsylvania will talk about using electronic medical records and machine learning algorithms to predict hospital-acquired infection and asymptomatically infected patients. So that will be really, really interesting. Do not miss it. That will be May 29th. And then our following tech talk will be on June 4th, and that will be Dr. Gary Henry, who is the Dean of Education and Human Development at the University of Delaware, and he will send his title a little later. So again, I'm really thrilled to introduce Dr. Parth Patel from IQVIA. Dr. Parth Patel is a senior machine learning data scientist at IQVIA in Plymouth Meeting here in Pennsylvania, where he leads data-driven solutions in the clinical trial realm using supervised and unsupervised machine learning algorithms. He obtained his PhD in bioinformatics and systems biology from University of Delaware in 2019, and as a MS, a Master of Science in Computer Sciences from Delaware State University in Dover. He has been working in the area of bioclinical informatics for the past 8 years, has incredible experience in all this topic, and has had also several awards over the years, notably at a University of Delaware Dissertation Fellowship in 2018, and many others. So we are really delighted to have Dr. Parth Patel here with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Jerkowitz, for the kind introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. So today I will be talking about deploying the AI/ML solutions for clinical trial recruitment in the high-value care. And this is one of the projects that I have worked on in IQVIA. So to start things, do you see the slide transition? I just wanted to make sure before I move on. Do you see the agenda slide?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So here's the agenda for today. I will be talking about briefly about current applications of AI across different industries, and then I would like to share some thoughts on what is my company, and then what is my company's vision, and then I'll talk about what IQVIA's approach is to AI, how we solve scientific challenges with the use of AI through an example. And then I'll share the vision that we have in my team, which is the Analytics Center of Excellence within IQVIA. I'll share the ML and AI vision that we have in the team. And then I'll briefly also talk about some of the partnerships that are extremely crucial for deploying these AI/ML solutions in the healthcare domain. And then majority of my talk will be spent on this particular topic in the agenda, which is optimizing the clinical trial recruitment. So I'll be talking about this project in much more detail. And then I'll end with what are some of the latest technological advancement in terms of AI that we could use in optimizing the clinical trial process. So this is what today's plan is. This is what the roadmap looks like for today, for the talk. So to begin with, I just wanted to give you a very brief introduction to some of the applications of AI, and many of you have already seen this before. We already know that AI has been used in many different industry, in the non-healthcare sector as well as in the healthcare sector. For example, in the non-healthcare sector, you take an example of automotive. Companies like Tesla, BMW, all these automotive car makers are actually working on driverless cars. That's where the AI has been used significantly. AI has been used in telecommunication, for example, like software systems like Siri, Alexa. That's where AI has been used a lot. Financial services use AI a lot for example, like in trading, specifically hedge fund companies are using AI extensively for trading purposes. And as well as in the insurance domain, insurance companies use AI, for example, to detect fraudulent events. So fraud detection is something that insurance companies as well as the financial company uses for, for example, a credit card fraud. So these are some of the example of how AI has been used in the healthcare sector, in the non-healthcare sector. Coming over to the healthcare sector, AI has been used extensively in imaging. For example, using CT scan and MRIs. Now we have capability of capability of finding a particular disease, diagnosing a disease given an image of CT scan or an MRI. On the research side, AI has been used in drug discovery as well as in genetics, in bioinformatics. For the analytical side, predictive modeling is a big portion of that's where the AI has been used. For example, like modeling rare disease, forecasting the cost of care for a patient for a particular drug. There are a lot of numerous NLP-based application, natural language processing-based application to find text information from surveys that patients have taken, from doctors' clinical notes, from publications about healthcare literature. So AI has been used also very extensively, heavily in the analytical side. As far as on the training side, AI has been used also within the healthcare domain for training the academic staff in the academia, as well as companies like Elsevier, which are now using AI, for example, to have a assisted, which use AI-based assistant technology for literature review in the healthcare research. So now they're using AI to do the literature review. As well as it's been used in decision making in general across different industries. So these are just the few examples of how AI has been used currently across different industry. Now I would like to share some thoughts on what is IQVIA, and then we'll give you a little bit of introduction to what is our company's vision and what's the mission. So for those of you who do not know what IQVIA is it's a contract research organization, also known as CRO, which is usually contracted by, so our company usually is contracted by sponsors, for example, like biopharma companies like Johnson & Johnson, Novartis, AstraZeneca, to perform one or more of a sponsor's trial-related duties or function. So for example, our company is contracted by the sponsor to act on their behalf, and we are responsible for running a clinical trial efficiently and economically for them. So that's the essential, that's the work that we do within IQVIA. IQVIA is a contract research organization which runs clinical trial for the sponsors. So this is the brief introduction to what my company is, and to share more insights on our vision. So our company's vision is to enhance healthcare intelligence through AI. And our mission is to create really scalable AI-based solutions and platforms that will put the power of AI in the hands of those who are caring for patients, while also enabling cutting-edge and innovative care delivery solutions. And for doing that, we have plethora of data ranging from documents, from imaging, from variables, genomics, diagnostics, to claims. And with all these plethora of data, IQVIA's AI platform actually interpolates these different means of data via AI-driven data management, self-service AI, to configurable integration of AI to achieve desired delivery solutions. For example, from predictive medical history to treatment to finding patients and for forecasting the cost of care for patients. So with this different means of data, we have the capability of delivering different care solutions with a patient-centric focus in mind. So that's the vision and that's the mission of my company is, and just to give you a little bit of introduction to what my company is. So without spending much time on this, I would like to share an example of how IQVIA approaches to AI, how we use AI, for example. So let me walk you through this example. So here the goal is we want to find targeted patients. So in order to find targeted patient, we first collect the medical history prior to diagnosis. And medical history, for example, could be all the tests, procedure, symptoms, their ER visits, specialist visits, treatments, and demographics. So we collect all of these data prior to diagnosis, and then that will create a representation for a particular patient. So we create this patient representation in order to find the targeted patient prior to diagnosis. Once we analyze and assemble this complex medical history of targeted patients, then we use machine learning to identify unique patterns in these targeted patients' medical history. So we basically try to identify, are there any relation between these different medical history for a particular patient? And once we find these unique patterns or rules, for example, then we can deploy this learning on a larger scale of a pool of patients to solve a variety of clinical and medical science challenges. So if we are able to identify what are the unique patterns embedded in a targeted set of patients, then we can learn this pattern, we can deploy those learnings on a larger set of patients, the set of pool of patients, and we can clearly identify, the algorithm will clearly identify what are the patients that we are looking for in the larger pool of people. So this is just one example of how IQVIA approaches to AI, and starting from the scratch. So this is just to show you one example. Now, moving forward, what I wanted to show you here is the vision that my team has for ML and AI. So Analytics Center of Excellence is a newly formed group within IQVIA. It was the group started in 2017. So within the Analytics Center of Excellence, we have three main objectives. Our mission is to basically transform the clinical development with the use of data science. And these are the three main objectives that we have in our team. So the first one is what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have an automated and optimized CRO company, meaning that by leveraging the ML-powered and highly automated site, country, and patient enrollment strategies, we would like to offer this automated and optimization technology to our rest of the company, so that they can run the clinical trial efficiently. And this is a very critical area for our company, because this is where we win or lose the contract with the sponsor. So the first objective is to make sure that we have an automated and optimized CRO with the help of AI and ML algorithms. The second one is we want to facilitate AI at point of care for recruitment. And we have machine learning algorithms for screening and identification of patients. And we really want to embed AI and ML early in the life cycle of drug delivery. So this is the second objective that we have within our group. And the third one, which is the recent one that we've added, is in the field of in silico clinical trials. So for this, we are developing AI/ML based solutions for answering some of the very basic questions, such as, for example, like who, how, and why patients respond to a given treatment. Along with that, we have some of our projects and offerings that provide usually the candidate compound selection. We have algorithms that will, find out whether this particular drug has repurposing effect or not, predict toxicity, efficacy of the drug, etc. But really with this, what we want to do is this will enable us to integrate discovery and development into this new paradigm. So, these are basically the three main objectives or the goals that we have in our team from the AI and ML perspective. And one of the most important piece of puzzle that I haven't discussed yet, and which I'm going to in the next slide, is to basically achieve this maximum success in deploying this AI and ML solution and operational pull-through. Is what we need is partnerships. We need you. So, like I said, we need partnerships. Without the healthcare providers involved, the impact of patient outcomes will never be realized. And we understand this a lot better in our team, because this is our, like I mentioned before, our goal here is we want to achieve the operational success of AI, but our focus is patient, not the AI or ML here. So, with the partnerships with the healthcare system, this enables us to provide clinical use case to build our advanced AI solutions. And it's actually the clinicians, it's actually the care providers' input that ensures that the results that we provided are actually fundamentally sound. Along with that, this partnership with the healthcare system will give us some basic idea on how our implementation fits into everyday workflow. And lastly, we are able to demonstrate the impact on the patient care through the help of partnership with the healthcare system. Along this route, I definitely want to highlight some other partnerships in terms of stakeholders. For example, partnerships like with the EHR vendors and other population health solutions involved in the implementation that we work with. Executives for providing ongoing resource and priority support. We do a lot of collaboration with our academic counterparts and institutions from time to time to innovate AI/ML solutions. Patient cohorts, we can't thank them enough. Regulatory and legal and compliance. These folks are our stakeholders, and all the other care providers which are involved in the patient care are actually all the stakeholders that are required for having an operational success for AI. And with all this in mind, with all these partnerships in mind, what we are doing is we are working to achieve a single-minded goal of developing scalable yet trustworthy AI solutions that can be implemented within any healthcare organization that promote improved patient outcomes. And like I said, patient is the focus here, not really the AI or ML. These are all the moving parts revolving around patients. So any question, feel free to stop me if you have any questions on things that I've talked about and interrupt me. I'll be more than happy to answer some of the questions as we go along. So I just wanted to, just put it out there. If you have any questions, please feel free to stop me at any point. So that's all in terms of what I wanted to share in terms of my company's vision, what my team's vision is, what is the partnership that is required to achieve maximum pull-through, operational pull-through in terms of deploying AI and ML solutions in the real world. So with this in mind, what I wanted to show you here, discuss or share with you today is that, as you know, that the healthcare industry is focusing towards value-based medicine for improved length of life and for increasing quality of life experienced by the patients. And physicians or the clinical investigators are the ones who play important roles in moving this healthcare system towards the high-value care, from patient outcomes to patient satisfaction or safety, and by really minimizing the low-value care and focusing more on a care that is high in value and necessary. So with this in mind, what I'm going to talk to you about today is one of the project, which is about how do we optimize clinical trial by choosing the most appropriate investigator. And just for adding a bit of humor, I call it Dr. Right. Who is the doctor which is appropriate for conducting a clinical trial? So just give me a second, please. So with this in mind, what I wanted to share with you today is from the higher level overview, I want you to think of this project or this particular system that I'm going to be showcasing, or the methodology, whatever you call it, is I want you to think of this as a recommendation system, just like Netflix. So if you go on Netflix, you watch a movie, next time you log into Netflix, it will give you list of preferred movies or list of some recommendation based on the prior history that you watched probably a week before, or a month before, or a day before. Based on a prior history, it will give you recommendation. Just like Netflix, this is a recommendation system which will give you list of recommended clinical investigators or physicians which are appropriate to run a clinical trial based on some of the previous experience that they have running a clinical trial for a particular therapeutic area or indication. So this is what this project is about from the higher level overview. Now, moving forward, I would like to highlight one thing here, that why we think that investigative recruitment is extremely important. Why finding a right physician is so important in clinical trial, and hence, in the high value care domain. So throughout our analysis, what we have found is that about 48% of the trial sites miss the enrollment targets. And these enrollment here, what I mean by enrollment is enrolling the patient. So 48% of the trial sites miss enrollment targets, and that leads to changes in the protocol for the clinical trial. So about 60% of the trials have protocol amendments, and because of these amendments, because of these changes, there is a huge delay. So about 80% of the trials are delayed mainly due to the enrollment of patients, and it's the physician who will recruit these patients. So if you have a right physician who can not only perform well, but they can also recruit patients, then it will solve these different problems throughout the clinical trial domain. And ultimately, the goal is, once we have the faster site identification, faster clinical trial timeline, then we'll be able to save a lot of money for the sponsors, and that will reflect eventually once finally the clinical trial is over and the drug is out at the patient's hand, because that cost will definitely reflect in terms of how much patient will pay for a particular drug. So like I mentioned before, clinical trial is an extremely complex and expensive process. And it's the physician who will recruit these patients with some predeterministic conditions or characteristics. They are the ones who will govern the treatment, collect the safety and efficacy data, and they really play an important role in this new drug development process in the healthcare. So prioritizing the top enrolling clinical investigator is extremely important. Like I mentioned before, if you have an investigator who are top enrollers or top performers, then it will lead to faster clinical site identification, shortened clinical timelines, and then it will have also the entire clinical trial execution will run smoothly. Only if you have an investigator who is top enrolling, who is the top performer. So with the clinical trial, this investigator recruitment plays an extremely important role in the clinical trial execution stage. So if you don't have any questions, do you guys have any questions before I move on to the next one? Okay. So to enhance the site selection with the data-driven insights, my team has implemented an ecosystem of machine learning models to predict investigators' likelihood of success. Our models basically assess investigators' quality and clinical trial experiences at IQVIA, and also looks for appropriateness to participate in studies based on some of the specialty information and the trial experiences. So just to put it in layman's term, I want you to think of this as an investigator recommendation system that has two different software solutions. One, which looks at the quality, and the second one, from the delivery perspective, looking at the eligibility or participation, and the second one is the performance. And by all these different, when I talk about these different two software solutions, these work independently on their own. But later, their outputs are actually harnessed into one to give a recommendation. So if we want to know who is an appropriate investigator, who is the best investigator, then we'll be merging the output of these two different software solutions. One will look at the quality perspective. The second one will be looking at from their delivery perspective in terms of, are they eligible to run a clinical trial? Do they perform well? Is something that we check. So that's the high-level overview of the models that will make these predictions, give us the recommendation. From the data side, IQVIA has a plethora of data assets. So some of the data that I'll be showing you will be going into this model are as follows. For example, we use trial experiences and expertise of a physician, of investigators. Some investigators have self-reported specialties as well as experiences. So we definitely use those, as well as we have some observed quality and risk data that we use in order to assess whether he or she is, what's the likelihood of them in terms of the quality risk. So that's basically the high-level overview of the machine learning models that will give us a recommendation on whether an investigator is appropriate or not. So before I dive into these individual components, what I wanted to show you was how the machine learning works. So if you don't know how machine learning works, then this slide will basically give you some insights on how machine learning algorithm or how the machine learning workflow works. So machine learning is basically machine learning algorithms usually build a mathematical model based on some sample data, and we call them a training data in order to make predictions or decisions on a newer set of data. So a simple 5-step process in machine learning are basically as follows. So we get data from different sources. That's the first step, get the data. The second step is you clean data, prepare, manipulate data. And this is where data is usually filtered, cleaned, features or variables are developed based on the input or the initial raw data. Once we have the clean data, prepared the data, manipulated the data, then we'll basically use that data to basically train the machine learning algorithm. So algorithms are built based on the training data. So this is where the machine learning model has been trained and saved. Once you have the machine learning model trained and saved, then you can reuse that machine learning model that you trained to test on using the unseen data. So using a new data, you'd like to test it, how the machine learning model works. So that's the fourth step. And the fifth step is basically once you identify the machine learning algorithm works, then you go into nitty-gritty of how can we improve the performance iteratively by making some fine adjustments or fine-tuning the model. So from getting the data to manipulating the data, training the model, testing the model, and then you can improve the model based on the fine-tuning that you would like to do in an iterative fashion. So this is a sample machine learning workflow that one can follow in order to achieve a successful outcome. So before I move on to the next slide, are there any questions that you guys have, or do you want me to go next slide? Okay. So this is where I will be talking about the quality tier model, which basically differentiates investigators' risk for quality issues based on 6 observed key risk indicators, or KRIs as we call it. So like I mentioned, there are two software components. One will look at from the quality side, and the other one will look at from the delivery perspective. So from the quality-based tier model will basically differentiate the investigator risk for quality issues based on these KRI data. So we take an example. So these are the KRI key risk indicator data that are available to us in our company. So we look at, for example, protocol deviations, overdue action items, serious adverse events rates, screen failure rates for patients. We look at the query rate, and this will compile into a set of features which will be applied into machine learning model. And then as an output, what we'll get is whether this investigator has a likelihood of being risky or not. And based on the probability that we get, we basically assign them into ranking from best tier to worst tier. Best meaning that best tier result indicates that investigator has a low risk for quality issues, and worst tier meaning that investigator has a high risk for quality issues. So this is basically a ranking system from 1 to 10, and tier. The word tier is just a fancy name for ranking. So best tier meaning the investigator has the lowest risk. Worst tier, investigator has the highest risk. And here I will not be able to discuss about exactly what machine learning algorithms that we use because of some company policies that we have. But I'll be more than happy to answer any of the questions that you have on any other questions that you have, besides the machine learning model and exactly what we use behind the scene. So this is one methodology that we use to assess the quality. So this is the first component. The second component is the delivery model, which looks at how investigator delivers. So delivery tier model identifies investigators who are appropriate to participate in a given clinical trial, and it also assesses their relative performance potential. Are they able to participate? Are they able to deliver? Is something that we both look into in this delivery tier model. So just to go in a bit of detail, basically the participation model predicts if an investigator is inappropriate for placement on a future trial within a specific indication. And the model here really leverages investigators' observed clinical trial experience at IQVIA and self-reported specialty information. So basically, the output of this, the response variable is basically a binary indicator, whether he or she is appropriate or not for conducting a clinical trial. And then, that's basically the output that we have for the participation model here. In terms of performance, the performance model predicts investigators' expected performance based upon their observed clinical trial experiences within a specific indication. So for this, the model really leverages broad series of data attributes. For example, like number of studies that investigators have done within an indication. We also look at indicators for whether this is investigator's first study in the indication. We also look at recency. We value that recent performers of investigators are quite important in determining whether they are eligible for running a clinical trial compared to their performance 10 years back or maybe 15 years back. So we value their relative performance based on recency and how they perform, how the physicians have done or conducted clinical trial in recent years compared to the 10 years mark or maybe 15-year mark. So these are some of the features that we use for building this performance model. And together, once these different models output their results, then we basically harness that result, and that will be our basically delivery tier. So delivery tier, just like quality, it's a ranking system which will assign rank from 1 to 10, 1 being the best tier based upon the results combined from participation and the performance model, and the worst tier meaning that particular investigator was not able to participate or else he or she didn't have any significant data showing a potential performance potential that we would like to have in an investigator for running a clinical trial in a specific indication. So this is a higher level, or this is a high level overview of how the ecosystem of delivery tier, a delivery model along with the quality model works. Okay. Any questions on this? If not, then I'll move on to the next slide. Okay. So like I mentioned before, within our group, what we want to ensure is there is an operational trust in AI. And in this slide, I would like you to show you the impact of the use of these predictive models on trial enrollment, rather than bore you guys with technical evaluation measurements such as accuracy, specificity, recall, AUC. I really want to show you the impact of using these predictive models and how can we enroll patients using this ecosystem of models in a real world scenarios. So this is basically the screenshot that I got it from the IQVIA's website, which uses our predictive models. So if you Google, and you can actually, this is out in public, so you can actually type in Google IQVIA site selection, and you will land on this page. So what I'm showing you here is that if you pick a let's say top 40 investigators that we recommended, then you'll see about 22% increase in the enrollment rate globally in all different therapeutic areas, compared to if you select investigators who are in the bottom 60, and just for fancy purposes, the company calls it priority sites, which are usually the investigators that we recommended, which are in top 40% when we rank them. So if we have 10 investigators, then if we recommend 4, then basically what we are saying is that if you pick the 4 investigators that we recommended, then you'll see an enrollment rate comparison, an increase of 22% across therapeutic area globally, compared to if you pick bottom 6 investigators. And this separation is also, I would like to highlight here that this separation of 22% is also statistically significant with the p-value of 0.001. I don't know if you can see the p-value, but if you can go on the IQVIA's website, you'll be able to see the p-values, and as I don't know if you can see this in the smaller fonts here, but yeah. Something I wanted to also discuss is this is a little bit of elaborated result in terms of different therapeutic areas. So as globally, we saw that yes, there was a separation. If you pick our top 40% investigators that we recommended, you basically get 22% increase across globally across all therapeutic areas. But if you want to dive into a particular therapeutic area, then you also see an enrollment rate increase across different therapeutic areas. And these are all the percentages for all the therapeutic areas that we have. So that's the end of the project that I wanted to discuss with you. Are there any questions before I move on to the next section, which is just the one slide that I have, which I would like to show you what's next in terms of AI in this domain. Any questions up to this point? If not, then I'll move on to the next slide.
Yes, I have a question. This is Claudine,
Sure.
Claudine Zurkowitz from Christian Care. Mm-hmm. So when you described the KRI, the source of data at this point was also IQVIA? Yes. So basically your source of data are investigators who are already in your system. And yes, if there are other experts that are not in your system, mm-hmm. you really cannot give any information about those. Or are you also integrating data specifically from other sources of data about investigators? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. So that is correct. So we use investigators' information or physicians' information that is available to us or those who have experience with IQVIA. But along with that, if we find that there is an investigator for which we do not have their experience working with IQVIA, then we definitely take their experiences from different sources. So we do have that capability. But how we value or how their performance will be based or how they will be ranked is slightly differently than we rate those physicians or investigators who have experience with IQVIA.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? I just want to make sure that.
Yes, sure. No, absolutely. And just as out of curiosity, how many investigators do you have in your database?
How many?
Yeah, I mean,
How many investigators we
a
have?
ballpark. Yes.
Ballpark, I would say maybe more than it's in hundreds of thousands. We have
Oh,
plenty of,
okay. All right.
yeah, it's
Okay.
yeah, we have
Yeah,
our
okay.
company is all
I just
over the world, so we have lots of information.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty. So I'll move on to the very last slide that I have, and I would like to share this basically this slide to give you an idea of what's the development in this domain. So the use of AI. So far what you have seen is use of machine learning, not the use of actual AI in optimizing the clinical trial. But in this slide, what I'm showing you is how we use AI in optimizing this clinical trial recruitment problem. So, like I mentioned before, IQVIA time to time partners with universities, colleges in the advancements of AI and ML solutions. So this was a work that was done in collaboration with Temple University. So what we've worked on is we've implemented a novel deep learning algorithm that will rank and select top enrolling investigators. So the limitation of the project that I mentioned before had one limitation, and it was not able to conduct any of the clinical trial documents that we have available in the publicly available domain. It only looks at investigators, it only ranks investigator based on their prior history or work with IQVIA based on their performance or previous experience. But with the integration of AI, we were able to extend this to include investigators with self-reported specialties along with their performance, but we were also able to add a notion of EHR data, treatments, procedures, drugs that they have assigned to patients. We've also looked at information from the clinical trial documents. So we were able to leverage these and learn and make the representation of clinical trial look like for the investigator, and that will actually boost our ranking and select in selecting the top enrolling investigators. So essentially, to walk you through quickly, the question remains the same, and I'll go through this. So given a pool of investigators for a new clinical trial, we actually aim to predict each investigator's enrollment performance and then select the top enrolling investigator. The question is the same. It's just that with the AI, we were able to leverage other additional data source, and we were able to learn some interesting pattern embedded within the EHR data coming from the clinicaltrials.gov, some publicly available domain. So in this particular, without going into much detail, but in this particular paper in the publication that we've submitted, usually the investigator features are extracted from their self-reported specialties and patient visit histories. And then some of the clinical trial features are also extracted from the documents, such as described treatment, the purpose of the trial, study design, for example, the indication, the therapeutic area, the desired population. These are all information which was missing from the previous workflow that I mentioned in the previous slides. So we were able to integrate all this information into this, using this AI into this clinical trial recruitment process. And along with that, the historical enrollment performance data for all the investigator trial pair are also used to train the predictive model. So these are all information that will go into this this AI algorithm. And this is, again, this paper is already published in JAMA, and I've also put a link on the paper. So if you have any question, then feel free to ask me any questions after you read the paper. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you on that. But yeah, so that's basically the idea behind what's coming next in terms of AI in finding the top enrolling physicians who would ultimately faster the clinical trial timelines, and that will reduce costs on the sponsor side. Hence, patients will more likely to pay less cost for a drug because the trial didn't cost that much money. So with that, I would like to thank, first of all, IQVIA for letting me share this AI ML insights with you. I would also like to thank Value Institute and Christiana Care for giving me this wonderful opportunity to present, and also like to thank Lisa and Deborah for setting this talk up for today. So thank you all, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have. That's all.
Any question for Dr. Patel? So I also have another question while we are waiting. So I think in one of your first slides, you mentioned that that you could work on recruiting patients, from EHR. So that means that you need to have access to these EHR to try to figure out who are the best eligible patients.
Yeah.
And so do you have experience with, so you need to have access to the EHR, to the hospital, to the healthcare system EHR.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have, so I think we cover about 80% across the US. That's our coverage. So we have EHR data coming from about across the US. If I talk about in terms of data coverage, we cover about 80% across the US. So our main source of EHR data is US. We are still working with the European authorities to have insights into data from Europe, specifically EHR data. But in the US, we have about 80%, we cover 80%. And then that's what we use, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes. No, I was just curious how, because EHR data are very protected. And I was wondering how it worked.
Yeah, and majority of these claims, go ahead.
No, do you have access directly to data warehouses or?
Actually, what IQVIA is it's a IQVIA. The inception of IQVIA was in 2016. It came after a merger of Quintiles and IMS. So Quintiles had data sources, and IMS had the analytical capacity. So they marry, and then it became IQVIA in 2016. So we have purchased data source companies like drug dev for investigators. Then we have data sources available. Mostly our EHR vendors that offer us the EHR data. We have actually purchased or have exclusive licensing with them. So these data we already have access to. Yes. Any questions?
I guess we were interrupted for a minute. I don't know whether it was my network or everyone's. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, I didn't know.
Great.
I thought it was just no one had any question. But if it was interrupted, then please ask any questions that if you have any.
Right.
Claudine, there is the question that came through the chat box.
Okay.
It asked, what role do reported adverse events play in assessing the quality of an investigator?
Yes, so that's one of the factor that we are looking at very carefully, because sometimes adverse events are not really doctor's fault. Sometimes patients forget to take medications on time. Sometimes patients are not up to the point where they have to be. So adverse events and serious adverse events are the two key risk indicators that we do not weigh that high, because of this ambiguity involved. Because it's not really doctor's fault or physician's fault if patients are not taking medications on time. Hence, they have some adverse events. So yeah, so that's the I don't know if that does that answer the question. I don't know who
Now,
asked.
it can also be directly related to the drug, to the
Could be. Yeah,
investigative drug. So,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
any other question, Lisa? Do you have any other questions?
No, nothing came through the chat.
All right. Well, I guess there are no other questions. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Patel, and hopefully we'll hear more about IQVIA or work with IQVIA in some of our clinical trials. Are you involved into any clinical trials related to COVID-19? Because I know that there are so many
Yeah, the
around the world.
company has about 10 plus clinical trials that they're running, including treatments and vaccine. But I'm not directly involved in any at this point.
I see.
Not my team is not involved. But maybe soon we can get a request. But yeah, I'm not sure at this point.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank
Yeah,
you.
well, thanks for having me today. It was a pleasure talking to you guys.
Right.
Yeah. Bye.